afternoon and happy Sabbath. Welcome to Truth Be Told.
a live talk program where youth's challenges and issues will be discussed.
I am Kendra Alfred.
And I am Jeanette Joseph, and we are your hosts for today's program. This afternoon, we'll be discussing the challenges of depression and how youths can identify it within themselves and get the right support.
To help us with today's discussion, we are joined by young persons from St. Kitts, Nevis, Montserrat, and Jamaica. At this time, we'll have our host, Jeanette Joseph, to open us with prayer.
Let us pray. Dear Candid, I want to thank you for gathering us here today through virtual means to have this important discussion, and I hope that the topic that we discuss and the points that will be presented will touch our youth, not only in Antigua but all around the Caribbean and to everyone that's listening. Thank you once again for bringing us here.
Amen.
Now, as God created a perfect world, one without flaw or even imperfections. But because of sin, we as God's children must face several issues, one of them being depression. So today we hope that as we carry out our discussion, we can not only provide sound advice for our fellow youths, but also clarify any misconceptions persons may have on the topic. Also, I'd just like to remind everyone viewing via Facebook or WhatsApp, feel free to give us questions and comments in the comment section. Now we're going to get into the questions. Our first question to our panelists, and anyone is free to answer. Our first question is, what is depression? What do you think depression is?
Okay, I think depression is an intense state of sadness, which sometimes will come with like feelings of, hopelessness, worthlessness. You feel worthless, helplessness. Sometimes you feel suicidal and antisocial.
Thank you. Before we continue, Javon, can you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Javon Hendrickson, and I am representing Nevis.
Okay, thank you.
The other panelists, could you also introduce yourselves quickly?
Hi, my name is Solana Vaughn, and I'm representing St. Kitts.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here with us. Our next panelist.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon and happy Sabbath. My name is Ria Smalling, and I am a trained social worker and counseling psychologist. My emphasis is in educational psychology. For the most part, and in the simplest terms, depression can be understood as a common, serious, but treatable medical illness that negatively affects how a person feels, thinks, or behaves. And in terms of behavior, this includes how the person would handle routine daily activities at home and at work, perhaps even at church, and when amongst friends. Those typically characterized by feelings of sadness, and this is very important, especially in relation to younger persons, or indifference, what we call apathy. Good news is that depression is treatable, and I know we will talk about that some more later.
Yes.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, so now on to our next question. How can young persons spot depression within themselves and their friends? Solana, would you like to answer this question?
Sure. I'm not a professional, but I believe that when you notice that you have a feeling of foreboding, of, a persistent feeling of being sad, in addition to you're not feeling like functioning in society at all, you don't want to do anything, and you're just sitting, you just want to lay in bed all day because you feel like there's no hope. It's just, what's the point of getting up and doing things? And if you notice that that's been happening with you, I think that's when you should start considering whether or not you have depression.
Thank you. Javon, would you like to contribute anything to that question?
I agree 100% with what she has to say. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So, Salana mentioned persistence. Depressive symptoms can vary from mild to severe. What that means is that not everyone who is experiencing depression will generally have the same intensity of, of mood dysfunction or will carry the same symptoms, right?
Yes.
Usually the symptoms, the depressive symptoms, and I will list them at least or more, then a diagnosis of depression cannot be given, regardless of the type of depression. Depressive symptoms may include feeling sad or having a depressed mood. In your friends, you may see something like unexplained crying spells. Usually outgoing, usually the life of the party. You may find that that person has withdrawn and has lost interest or pleasure in activities that they used to enjoy a lot. Change in you would observe this weight loss or weight gain that is unrelated to dieting. There is usually sometimes trouble sleeping or sleeping too much. So, like Solana said, you may be in bed and you just don't want to get up today, right? But there is also trouble sleeping. So, whenever you're losing sleep, it can also be a sign of depression. As I mentioned earlier, irritability, anger, a short temper, um, some amount of worry, anxiety, and agitation. These are also symptoms of depression that you could be on the lookout for. You will also find, or you may also find, that the person is more lethargic. They have lost energy. They seem to be tired all the time, right? You may also find, in relation to agitation, that there is an increase in purposeless physical activity. So they wring their hands a lot, they may be pacing a lot. On the opposite side, there may be slowed movements and speech. And these symptoms I'm addressing here are quite important because these are things that can be observed. You may also hear the person mention unexplained aches and pains, right? So my head hurts, my tummy hurts. Those are some of the things that you need to look out for, and there is no known cause for the headache or the tummy ache, right? Generally, as Solana said, there are also feelings of worthlessness or feelings of guilt. There is pessimism. There can also be apathy, indifference. Happens with school anymore or anything like that. There is also difficulty thinking, concentrating, or making decisions. So things that should be pretty simple, right? Now begin to take more time. And perhaps the most critical of all symptoms are thoughts of death or suicide, right?
Yes.
And I believe it is important at this point to note that feelings of sadness are not abnormal. When something happens, it's okay to feel sad, If somebody dies, if you lose a job, if you got a bad grade, feelings of sadness are not abnormal. They are quite normal in response to identifiable situations. However, you may find that if these feelings or these symptoms last in excess of 2 weeks, then we have entered the problem zone.
Thank you so much.
And I'd also like to add, it's important to not self-diagnose. It is like all of the signs you're mentioning, it is very important to pay keen attention to that, because from there you can advise the person or maybe yourself that, okay, maybe I should seek expert help from your local health provider. And yeah, I really appreciate those points, because it's important for us to take that extra step to get um, professional help. So our next question, we'll move on to what are the cause. Oh no, we've covered what are the causes of depression. So I'd like to throw this question out. Is there any truth that depression is genetic, or is it passed on through one's family genes? I'll repeat it once more. Is there any truth that depression is genetic, or is it passed on through one's family genes?
The onset of depression may be related to genetic factors, but this is not always the case. And even if there is a family history of depression, we cannot quickly assume that the cause of the individual's depression is genetic. It still requires a professional evaluation and examination of the person's medical history, of the family history, as well as what exactly are the symptoms that the person is having. Sometimes blood tests have to be done to rule out biochemical factors. There are certain hormones within the body that can also be the cause of depression. Imbalances in those hormones can also be the cause of depression. And so blood tests may have to be done to rule out those factors as well, right? Other causes of depression may relate to medication. Sometimes you are using a medication for a current illness, and that medication can bring about one of the side effects or the adverse reactions to the medication you're using can cause depression. There are also cognitive factors. People with negative thinking patterns and low self esteem are more likely to develop depression, right? We also find that depression is more common in females than in males. While we are not clear why this is so, it is presumed that, as I mentioned before, the hormonal changes that women go through almost on a monthly basis because of menstruation, and then later on pregnancy, and then later on childbirth. And
Oh, it's a lot. And then
women
yeah.
likely to report depression. Situational and environmental factors also contribute to depression. So when people experience trauma at an early age, it can cause long-term changes in how their brains respond to fear and stress. Pretty much what we are saying is that exposure to early trauma, whether it is the loss of a close caregiver or a close family member, in Jamaica, our children are repeatedly exposed to violent crime and gun related crime. Long term resiliencies and susceptible to stressors that come later in life. Difficult or traumatic life events, including divorce, financial problems, relationship problems for the young persons, even amongst your peers at school, challenges with your friends, your best friend betrayed you. Those things may or do have the potential to trigger a depressive episode, the death of a loved one. Continuous exposure to violence, neglect, abuse, or poverty can also contribute to depression. So, while going back to the question, while there are genetic antecedents for depression, we have to be careful that we don't just assume that because somebody in your family had a mood disorder or had another type of mental illness, your depression is springing from that. It requires comprehensive evaluation.
Yes, thank you so much for clearing that up, ma'am. I think that's something that we say a lot in the Caribbean. That if you, her father crazy, so she must be crazy. So I thank you for clearing that up for us. So we're gonna jump into our next question, and this is depression a sin? And I think this is the question that's going to carry us into the meat of the discussion, because I think that depression is such a taboo topic in our church.
That's true.
And we're going to go into some of the misconceptions of depression afterwards, but we're going to deal with this question first. Is depression a sin? And Solana, would you like to tackle this question?
Sure. When I think about when you ask that question, some people might be, well, if you're depressed, that means you don't have faith in God, that you don't expect God to have a future for you. But in my thinking, depression is an illness. Right. And if depression is an illness, God doesn't say that thou shalt not get influenza and thou shalt not get tetanus. It's an illness, so it's not that God would punish you for getting sick. Disease and sickness and illness came in the world with sin. So God doesn't blame us for suffering from sin that is solely the devil's fault, So I don't think young people should be afraid if they're feeling like depressed and if they have depression that they're going against some doctrine. No. It's just illness, and you can even pray to God to help you with that illness, and He would gladly do it.
Yes, thank you so much, Solana. Javon, would you like to contribute anything to that question?
Well, I was going to state the same thing that she was saying, yeah. So yeah, I have to agree with that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And I definitely agree with Solana and Javon. It's definitely not sin. It is a medical condition. We wouldn't consider hypertension or diabetes to be sin, right? We wouldn't think that cancer is a sin. So depression is not sin. When we talk about depression as Christians, though, it is very important to consider the element of faith and the role that faith can play in our recovery, a reliance on God, the consideration that He holds and has everything in His hands, and to rely on what we call the blessed hope, because one of the features of depression is a sense of hopelessness. So when we are able to direct it or to re-establish aids the recovery process. Definitely does.
Do you mind repeating that last part?
That last sentence,
yeah.
Yes. Your insert jumped a little bit. Wanted to catch that last sentence.
And I must apologize to everyone. I am having a major issue with my internet connection this afternoon. I apologize for that. But I was saying that faith and trust in God is very important and an integral contributor to the recovery process.
Yes, thank you so much. And I'm happy that you brought up the recovery process, and this leads us into our next question. Should Adventists go to therapy and take medicine to treat their depression? And we would want you to highlight the pros and the cons of Adventists going to depression. And Javon, we'd like to hear your contribution to this question.
Okay, so seeing that depression is an illness, I don't see any problem with one taking medicine in order for them to feel better. And I would advise anyone who is depressed to go to therapy, because most times persons who are depressed would like to be heard, and we like a little bit of supportive feedback.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with Javon. The same way you would take some bush tea or some vitamin C when you're sick, you should take the prescribed medicine from a professional.
Yes.
If they give it to you, if they prescribe it to you and they say, you this will help you recover, trust the medical professionals and do what they instruct you, because at the end of the day, you want to heal from your illness.
Thank you. So do you think that there are any cons as a Seventh-day Adventist to go to therapy? Because I remember growing up, I heard that if you go to therapy, then you lack faith, or you're looking for strength somewhere where you shouldn't look for it. So would you like to comment on that?
Sure. That I don't understand the stigma behind going to therapy, because even God said, when someone is sick, you all should pray, not just say come straight to me. You all should come together and pray for the person. You need people, and sometimes, yes, prayer works. I'll never deny that. I am a testimony that prayer works. But God gave us intellect, and God provided human beings with the skills to learn how to handle these things. And if you have a professional who can help you with your mental health, yes, use it. In fact, there are many of these therapists and even psychologists in the Seventh-day Adventist Church that are available for Seventh-day Adventists. So there shouldn't be anything wrong with getting help. You're doing what you're supposed to do.
Yes, after all, we get all of our wisdom from God. So that's a really helpful point. Anybody else would like to pitch in at this point?
I think a useful suggestion for you as young persons in the South World Conference would be to advocate with your conference or your local churches to develop a registry of counselors and therapists, so that when members are struggling with any kind of mental illness, just in case they're not comfortable going to just any regular therapist, they can access Christian counseling or Christian therapeutic support through these Seventh-day Adventist or Christian counselors, right? I am not, however, going to encourage that if a Seventh-day Adventist therapist is not available, then don't go to a therapist.
Yeah, that's correct.
I'm happy that you hit that. Yes.
It'd be really helpful. That's a very, very good idea, because it's
Seems like her internet just dropped out. Yes, we were trying to make the point that even if a Seventh-day Adventist therapist is not available, she's not saying that you should not go to one who is not a Christian or a Seventh-day Adventist, because in studying psychology, my sister is she's studying psychology, and she told me that it's not ethical for someone to use a religion against you when they're trying to help something as a mental illness. So it would, I think the word is malpractice, right? So they should not use your religion against you in that matter.
Because at the end of the day, we just all want to be healthy, we need help, and safe. So that's all we really want to promote. And I love the idea that she said to set up more of a system, to have persons available, because we as young people, we do want the help, and we appreciate any type of help that is available to us. So with that said, we are, anybody, Javon, would you like to say anything? I don't think we got anything from you that far.
Beg your pardon?
Would you like to add anything else to the conversation?
No, no, I'm totally, I agree with everything they're saying.
Yes, yes, thank you.
Yes, we really got some very, very helpful
Yeah.
points. But at this time, we are going to take our break. So when we come back, we'll be tackling the rest of our questions. So we'll be back soon. Thank you.
Welcome back. Just like to encourage you guys to remember that you can drop your questions on the chat on YouTube or Facebook so that you can get your questions answered. So now we're going to get into the next question is how can young persons support their friends who are struggling with depression? How can young persons support their friends who are struggling with depression? Because I've had situations where my friends would have come to me and tell me that they're feeling sad or they're feeling depressed and not knowing what to say or how to help them or how to respond.
Yeah.
So what examples can you give to us as young people to interact with our friends who are going through a depressive state?
Well, I would say in most cases you should, just sometimes you just want a listening ear. So I would say you should just, listen. And then in other cases, you should be a lot more supportive. And then my next point would be you should plan more activities with them so that, it would take their mind off of all the stress that they're going through.
That's true.
Thank you, Javon. That's a good contribution.
Yeah.
So now,
Well, I agree with Yvonne, being supportive, listening, and, not putting down. So when they say they're feeling something, don't say, well, maybe you're not feeling that. Let them know that you get that they're going through something. And sometimes you don't even need to say anything. Like Javon said, you just need to listen. Be there. Being there for them sometimes is the best thing that you can do for them. But try not to we have a lot of people going, well, you're just sad, so just feel happy, but it's not that simple sometimes. So it'd be better for you to just listen, try to understand what they're going through, and just be there for them.
thank you.
That would be very, very helpful.
Ms. Smalling?
Encourage your friend to speak and advocate.
Mm-hmm.
I think both tests
Can you speak up a little bit more so we can hear you clearly?
especially for young persons, maybe in high school, not yet young adults. I would definitely recommend that they encourage their friend to speak with an adult, right?
Yes.
It would also be useful, whatever age, to help your friend to identify a counselor at school, at church, in the wider community. Be there. As you all said, listen, encourage, include them, remind them how much you value them and how much they mean to you in practical ways. So don't just say it. If that's the friend that used to style your hair, make sure that you need a hairstyle very regular, right?
Yeah.
If that's your friend that helps you with your math assignment or something that you really like, make sure that you are requesting that food, or make sure that you are having a lot of math problems all of a sudden that needs your friend's assistance. So remind them how much they mean to you in practical ways, and make plans with them for the future, right? Make plans with them for the future. Let them know how much you're looking forward to those plans, right?
Talk about every now and again checking. Talk about what you're going to wear, the things you're going to do, what you're going to eat. And as soon as you're done with that, make more plans for the future, right? So those are some of the things you can do. It is important to note, most important to note, that if you suspect that they will harm themselves through suicide, or know that they have already attempted to harm themselves, break confidentiality, right? Tell someone, get them the help that they need, all right? You're not required on any account to keep that a secret, right? And don't feel burdened that you need to keep that a secret. If they tell you that they're going to hurt themselves, or they tell you that they want to hurt themselves, or they tell you that, I tried but I failed, tell someone, right? Yes, while encouraging and, being a good friend, being there for them is important. Make sure that you're doing everything within your power to connect them to professional help, right? Because what the symptoms look like today, they can get worse as time progresses, right? So the earlier your friend is able to access professional treatment, the better the outcome, the better the recovery.
Okay, you had a little lag there. Thank you so much for that contribution this morning. Would you like to share your personal experience with depression? Could be any one of you guys, any personal experience, and you can show
one that you're willing to share.
Yeah, once you're comfortable. Yes.
Well, I haven't gone through depression, in my opinion, but I've gone through some pretty traumatic experiences that can really cause you to feel pretty down. My parents got divorced when I was 9, and it was not a very pleasant breakup, and I was kind of caught in the middle of that. And a lot of the times I was kind of dealing with it on my own because I'm an only kid, no siblings to really be around to talk to about that. But what really kept me from slipping down the slope of just feeling like, oh, there's no hope and there's no way I can get through this, was that I always knew that I had God, and he would be always there for me. That was the way for me not to feel so alone. So I kept holding on to, God has a plan for it. God has a plan for it. God has a plan for it. And I can tell you today that, it's been about 9 years since I've been apart, and I've been dealing with it for 9 years, but it's gotten so much easier in 9 years to deal with the problems and the trauma from it. So I really have to say God was my little backbone when I had to deal with that sad experience. I also had a few friends who, they haven't harmed themselves, praise God, and a few of them are getting help, but I've had a few friends who've had to deal with depression, and it was scary seeing them, people I thought were really happy, go through it. But by God's grace, they're still here, and I hope that they continue working on it.
Yes, thank you so much. Anyone else would like to share their personal experience?
Well, I've never gone through depression, but I remember there was a point in time where I was looking for a job, and it seemed like nothing was coming. So, and every time I feel sad, I normally go to this Deuteronomy 31:8, where it says, "The Lord Himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you." So, do not be disheartened or discouraged.
Thank you so much. Just a reminder that persons who are viewing on YouTube and Facebook, you're free to send your questions in the chats. We have one question. Okay, what part does prayer play in dealing with depression? What part does prayer play in dealing with depression? And does anyone can answer this question?
It's putting a petition before God, which is the best way to deal with any problem. You're saying, Lord, yes, God knows everything, but when you ask, when you put it before Him, how I heard one pastor once say, when you ring the bells of heaven, you get God's attention, and you're calling on Him to help you, and He helps you. I mean, He helped Gideon, He helped Moses, He helped David, and David was not the most perfect person in the world, but once you call on Him, He's there to help you.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Definitely, yeah. Oh, we have one more question. Can your companion influence the onset of depression? Can your companion influence the onset of depression?
This one, can you speak up a bit here, please?
When it comes on to environmental factors, you will realize that our relationships, our close relationships, play a vital part in our mental health, right? And so for young persons, it's important to choose your friends wisely, right? Try as best as possible to not form relationships that are toxic. Or, if you get into a relationship, a friendship, and you find that it is toxic, excuse yourself from that relationship politely, right? If you're in the sun all day, you will feel hot, right? If you're in a very cold room all day, you will feel cold. And so it is very important that we are very careful about the quality of the friends that we choose, which is not to say that we don't associate with those who may be different from us, because we have a role to play in witnessing, but we are ensuring that the witness or the influence goes from you to them and not the other way around, right? Don't try to be absorbing all of that toxic energy.
Right. Yes, thank you. I have a question. There's this new generation, Gen Z, where we have like coping mechanisms where when we talk about our trauma, we talk about it and we laugh at it.
Yeah.
Is that healthy?
To just laugh.
Yeah, you're talking with your friend about your trauma, and you're talking about something like you're laughing
like, oh, this happened to me.
Yeah, can you believe? And you just laugh. Is that a healthy coping mechanism? Because I think it works for some people, but I want to hear from the professional. Is it healthy?
No two people are the same. When we talk about the impact of a traumatic situation, we have to get into individual resiliences, okay? I can tell you, I am from a country where we laugh about very serious things. The minute something horrific happens in the world, 5 minutes later, there is a meme from Jamaica on social media that is, poking fun at it and infusing some humor into it. At the same time, however, we have a saying in Jamaica that goes, what is joke to you is death to somebody else, right? So we have to be cognizant that persons have different resiliences, and therefore what you find funny or just a joke, right, could have affected someone very deeply and even long beyond the point when it occurred. And so we have to practice sensitivity to that, right? You have to know who you are around and be very careful to be sensitive about those things. Humor helps. Humor always helps. A merry heart is medicine. I didn't say so. Solomon did. But we also need to be very careful that we don't think that because we find it funny or it's just water off a duck's back, that it is that way for everyone else.
Yeah, true. That's true.
Thank you.
And the chat is actually blowing up right now. We have a few questions, so I'm gonna try to say them as quickly as possible. So, our question is from Brian Thomas. He says, "Jesus said, 'Cast all your cares upon Him.' My question is, as Christians, should we allow depression to plague our Christian lives?" And I'm also gonna say another question for another panelist to say because we have a few I want to get off. So we have another question: how can young persons go about opening up to their parents about how they are feeling, especially if they feel they may be depressed? And this is from Dentricia Blanchett. So our two questions: as Christians, should we allow depression to plague our Christian lives? And also, how can young persons go about opening up to their parents about how they are feeling, especially if they feel they may be depressed?
I would like to address Blaine Thomas, right? Nobody goes to the shop to buy diabetes, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody ever downloads hypertension into their life or uploads cancer into a part of their body. Depression is not something that you can choose and unchoose. What we have is the assurance that if you are struggling with depression, we can cast our cares upon Him. It is not that we have chosen to take on depression because we have chosen not to cast our cares upon Him. It is actually the reverse. God is saying to us as Christians that sin has altered so much in our world. Bad things happen. And when they do, know that I am your God. You can cast your cares on me, right? And so, as I said earlier, this aspect of our faith is an integral part of our recovery. While we are accessing the therapeutic support that we need, or while we may be using whatever medication is provided by the doctor, we also have the faith that we are walking with God through it.
Any of our other panelists would like to add to that question?
I mean, yes, correct. She's very correct. I completely agree with her. People depression and allow it to then not an illness. Now, choice. You don't choose, like she said, you don't choose to get many of the illnesses that you get. So how could you choose or allow yourself to get depression? You know, it comes on before people even realize it. You know, it just takes one little catalyst, and you're in it, and you didn't even realize how you got there. So, yeah, I agree with her.
The other question is, how can young persons go about opening up to their parents about how they are feeling, especially if they may be depressed? Javon, would you like to tackle this one first?
Okay, so in most cases, I think it comes down to the relationship you have with your parents too, because me growing in my era, like I was afraid of my parents. I used to get licks and all this. I was afraid. So for instance, you're going out, you would ask a friend to ask your mom to hey, can Javon come out? So I would say, like, if you're comfortable with someone, you will confide in them and then have them, like, say, tell your mom or your parents that, hey, I'm going through this, and then they'll probably approach you.
Yes, I agree. It's very important for parents to develop an actual relationship or appropriate friendship with your children, because if you don't, then they're not going to want to communicate with you when they're actually going through things. So
and that becomes very toxic.
Yes,
well.
I mean, if you're not comfortable in the home that you're in, that can't be healthy. So it's very important to develop a relationship with your parents, and the same thing, children with their parents. Yeah.
And some persons might look for outside help, and they may not know where to go and end up going to the wrong place. Which we don't want. So yeah, that's really important. Oh, did we? Okay, so one more question. Oh, yes, we have a question. How could I possibly have forgotten about that one? Can your work environment play a role in depression? Can your work environment play a role in depression?
Oh, definitely. Most definitely. Most definitely. As I said before, any toxic zone of interaction, it can be in your family, it can be at work, it can be at church, it can be amongst your friends, and repeated constant exposure to that environmental stressor can wear out your resilience. It can. It really can, and the trust relationship. You don't trust people at work, or usually we don't trust people at work on the same level that we would trust a family member. But whatever the level of trust, when that is betrayed, when the organization that you have given so many years to, or so many hours to, or that you have made sacrifices for, throws you under the rug, right? It is enough of a trigger. Like I said when we were discussing the causes of depression, right? Very often there are multiple factors working together, but sometimes it can just be one thing, right? That affects you so deeply, right? That it pushes you into major depression.
Okay, thank you for that. I would like to point out that depression is not a modern day problem. I think depression has been around for a very long time.
Definitely.
Through research, I found out that in the Bible is filled with many examples of persons who had depression. For example, Job, when he was afflicted with sores and oppressed, and he expressed profound despair and grief. He said in Job 10:18-21, "Why then did you deliver me from my mother's womb? Why didn't you let me die at birth? It would be as though I had never existed, going differently from the womb to the grave. I have only a few days left, so leave me alone that I may have a moment of comfort before I leave, never to return." And similarly, we have Elijah, where God demonstrated his power on Mount Carmel. He said in First Kings 19:3-4, he said, I've had enough, Lord. Take my life. So I know better than my ancestors who have died before me. So I think that it's very important to point out that it's not a modern problem. Depression has been around for a very long time, and it's important to seek help if it is serious.
So we can see that it's not just us, it's not something exclusive, it could happen to anyone. It has been happening for years, long, long before we even thought to even be in this world.
Yes.
So that's very important. We also have another question. How do you know who to trust when you're depressed without having the fear of them telling someone else? Ooh. How do you know who to trust when you're depressed without having the fear of telling someone else?
Trust your gut and trust the track record.
Right.
Okay.
Good points. Good points.
Yes.
Trust your gut and trust the track record.
Javon?
I'll have to agree with what Miss Smalling just stated. You have to trust your God, obviously, and the track record, of course, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Next question. Can a lack of sleep cause depression? Can a lack of sleep cause depression?
We've said a lot of times that our faith is a critical part of recovery. Another aspect of our lives that's a critical part of recovery are our lifestyle choices, right? As Seventh-day Adventist young persons, we should be familiar with the mnemonic New Start, right? And we know that rest is a critical part of that. And so when you're not sleeping well, it is both caused by as well as triggers hormonal imbalances, which play a major role in the onset or which can play a major role in the onset of depressive episodes, right? So yes, a lack of sleep can cause depression. Overall, a healthy lifestyle, eating well, exercising. Exercise releases all the good hormones, the hormones that make you feel so good and improve your mood and emotions. So overall, nutrition, exercising, making sure that you are hydrating well, getting enough sunshine, vitamin D, right, which is also closely related to our moods, right? Abstaining from things such as alcohol and drugs, because you find that that's one of the contributors to depression as well. Alcohol is actually a depressant, or can serve to be a depressant. It gives you a high and then it just plunges you down into the pits, right? So that's why you sometimes will see a drunken man cursing, and then after he drinks some more, he lays down on the road and he's crying, right? Have you ever seen that? Right. So alcohol and drug use can also be contributors. So we are abstaining from things that are not good for us, and we are using in moderation things that are good for us. Fresh air, a nice, calm, peaceful atmosphere, fresh air, rest, and as we've been saying since we started, trust in God. All of these things are critical to both prevention and to facilitating or aiding recovery with professional help.
Definitely. Sadly, we are running out of time, but today was such a fruitful discussion, and I'm really thankful for all the feedback. I really hope everyone tuning in and who listened that it was really helpful. Also, a special shout out to Blaine Thomas for the interesting questions, and also everyone else who would have given us questions. We really appreciate it.
We would like to leave with you this text, Philippians 4, 6, and 7. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything and prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Jesus Christ.
So we want to thank you once again for being here with us. If you have any questions on the topic, or you'd like to speak on, or if you'd like to be a panelist member, make sure to email us at slcyouthmedia@gmail.com. I'll repeat it once more, slcyouthmedia@gmail.com. We are here to unpack the truth as rooted in God's Word on issues impacting youth.
Until our next episode, I am Candid Alfred.
I am Gina Joseph.
Stay safe and God bless.